into Terry Pratchett's The Color of Magic. We're going to be exploring the hilarious side of this book and how its satire, even in a fantastical world, can reveal some surprising truths about our own.
Yeah.
What's interesting about this first Discworld book is that it feels very different from the later books
For sure.
in the series. It's almost like Pratchett was still discovering the potential of this crazy world that he created.
It has a different energy to it, doesn't it? Almost like a raw, unbridled creativity, like Pratchett is finding his comedic voice and experimenting with the boundaries.
Exactly. And one of the first things that grabs you is the sheer absurdity of the setting itself. A flat planet balanced on 4 elephants who are standing on a giant turtle swimming through space.
It's such a brilliant concept, though, because it immediately signals to the reader that this is not your typical fantasy world, you know? He's taking these familiar tropes of the genre and just pushing them to their most ludicrous extreme.
And by doing that, he creates this space where he can poke fun at our world without directly confronting it.
Exactly.
For example, the city of Ankh-Morpork, the main setting for much of the book, is this sprawling, chaotic metropolis that's both hilarious and a bit too close to reality for comfort.
Oh, absolutely. Ankh-Morpork is just like a perfect microcosm of how Pratchett uses humor to like hold a mirror up to society. It's got all the problems of a real city.
Exactly.
Crime, poverty, corruption, but magnified to this like comedic scale. What do you think, listener? Do you see any parallels?
Oh, absolutely.
Between Ankh-Morpork and cities in our world?
And it's not just the setting that's satirical.
Right.
Pratchett also populates his world with characters who are both familiar and delightfully subversive.
Yes.
Take Rincewind, for instance. He's the classic reluctant hero, a wizard who'd rather run from danger than face it head on.
Rincewind is so relatable because he embodies that part of us that just wants to avoid conflict and like get on with our lives. But he's constantly getting caught up in these crazy situations. His primary goal is just to survive.
He's the everyman trapped in this extraordinary world.
Yes.
And then you have Two-Flower, the eternally optimistic tourist from the Agatean Empire.
Right.
A continent across the disc that's very loosely based on cultures of the Far East. Two-Flower's naivete and wonder at everything they encounter provide a constant source of humor. He's like a child seeing the world for the first time. And it's through his eyes that we get to experience the absurdity of the Discworld.
You know, it's interesting because Two-Flower's innocence allows him to cut through a lot of the cynicism and pretense that we encounter in the world. He just takes things at face value, and in doing so, he often exposes the hypocrisy and foolishness of those around him. And it's like this reminder that sometimes a fresh perspective can be incredibly insightful.
There's one scene where Two-Flower is trying to explain the concept of insurance to a group of Ankh-Morporkians, and it completely goes over their heads.
Oh, that's brilliant.
It's a great example of how Pratchett uses cultural differences and misunderstandings to create humor. But it also makes you think about how often we take our own cultural norms for granted.
It's such a great clash between Two-Flower's utterly logical yet naive worldview and like the cynical pragmatism of the Ankh-Morporkians. It's just like a great example of how Pratchett can pack so much into a seemingly simple comedic moment.
I know, it's great.
One of the things that makes The Color of Magic so funny is how Pratchett uses language. He's a master of wordplay and puns and these little asides that make you chuckle.
It's true. I was reading it and I just kept wanting to like underline things and be like, oh, I gotta share this with somebody.
Yes, totally.
It's like he's winking at you like, we're both smart enough to get this.
Yes, exactly. It's like a shared understanding. You know, it's like you and the author are both in on the joke, and it makes the humor so effective. It creates that connection between you, and you feel like you're part of something.
Yeah, it makes it so much more enjoyable. But it's not all just silly wordplay. There's a deeper level of satire here too, right? He's using the humor to comment on some pretty serious stuff like greed, the abuse of power, just the general absurdity of human behavior.
Oh, absolutely. He does it so well, too. Like, for example, the way he portrays the patrician of Ankh-Morpork. He's this incredibly powerful figure, but he's also deeply cynical and pragmatic. Like, he understands how power works, and he's not afraid to use it, even if it means bending the rules a little bit.
He's like a caricature of like a real-world politician, but with a sense of humor about it?
Yes, exactly.
What do you think, listener? Does Pratchett's portrayal of, like, power dynamics in Ankh-Morpork resonate with you?
You know, it's interesting because on the one hand, you have these like larger-than-life characters like the Patricia, but then you have like regular people like Rincewind and Twoflower
Right.
who are just constantly getting caught up in like the machinations of the people in power.
And it's through their experiences that he really highlights the absurdity of it all.
Exactly. But what I love about Pratchett's satire is it's never mean-spirited. He's making fun of our flaws, but he does it with this affection.
It's like, hey, look, we're all messed up, but it's okay.
Right.
Let's just laugh at ourselves and try to do a little better.
Exactly. And that's what resonates with people. I think that's why Pratchett's books are still so popular today. They offer this way to look at the world with a sense of humor and perspective.
Especially today, when everything can feel so overwhelming, Pratchett is like this pressure valve to like release some of that tension and see the absurdity in everything.
Yeah, and you know, it's not just escapism, it's like a way of engaging with the world, but in a more thoughtful way.
It's like having your cake and eating it, too. You get to laugh at it all, but you're also getting something valuable from it.
Yes, exactly.
You know, it's interesting that you say that, because one thing I noticed was how much it felt like he was satirizing the fantasy genre itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like all those classic fantasy tropes that he includes.
Right.
He's not just referencing them, he's playing with them.
Yeah.
Subverting expectations.
Totally.
Turning them on their head.
Like with Rincewind, the most inept wizard ever.
Yeah.
He's the complete opposite of like the all-powerful wise wizard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you have Twoflower, who constantly misunderstands the conventions of the fantasy world, which leads to some really funny situations.
It's like he's saying, look, these tropes are fun, but let's not take them too seriously.
Exactly, and by poking fun at the genre, he's opening it up to new possibilities.
Yeah.
He's showing that fantasy can be more than just quests and battles.
Right.
It can be funny and satirical and thoughtful, too.
Yeah, and that's what makes The Color of Magic so great. It manages to be all those things at once.
And he's having such a good time doing it, too. You can tell when you're reading it.
Yes.
And that just makes it even more enjoyable.
It's a book that makes you laugh out loud, but also makes you think. And that's a pretty rare combination.
It really is. You know, it's amazing how he uses the humor to tackle such complex themes,
Oh, yeah.
like the nature of belief.
Oh, that's a good one. We haven't even touched on that yet. How does that come across in The Color of Magic?
Well, you've got Twoflower, who just believes in the good in everyone, no matter what.
Right.
And then you have Rincewind, who's seen the worst of it all and isn't really sure if he believes in anything anymore.
Almost like they're two sides of the same coin, right?
Exactly. And through them, Pratchett explores how our beliefs shape how we see the world. Like, is it better to believe in something even if it's not true? Or is it better to face reality with a clear mind?
Wow, that's a pretty deep question to ask in a comedic fantasy novel.
That's the brilliance of Pratchett. Makes you laugh and makes you question everything you thought you knew.
It's a wild ride, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how Pratchett uses his characters in The Color of Magic.
Yeah.
They may seem like caricatures on the surface,
Right.
but underneath it all,
Yeah.
they reflect real human emotions and motivations.
It's true. You really start to connect with them as you get further along.
Rincewind is a great example. His cowardice is played for laughs,
Yeah.
but it also taps into that very basic human instinct.
Right.
Self-preservation.
Absolutely. Like that voice in our heads that says, run when things get dangerous.
Exactly.
But even Rincewind has moments of bravery,
He does.
even if it's accidental. What do you think, listener? Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you had to be brave? Maybe even surprised yourself?
I know, I have. And then you have Twoflower, who's almost the opposite of Rincewind.
Right.
Eternal optimist, sees the best in everyone.
He's so endearing.
I know. And it can be frustrating,
Yeah.
but it's also a really nice reminder
Right.
that a little bit of blind faith can be a good thing.
It can.
And it's through Twoflower's experiences that Pratchett satirizes our own tendency to judge others based on just what we see on the surface.
It's so true. It's like he's holding up a mirror